Alright, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Rolling Greasy Car Repairs. Alright, so today we have a 1999 Nissan Maxima, once again. Just a joy to work on this thing, all the time. So anyway, we're going to be replacing the alternator on this vehicle. It decided to go on the owner, and then it drained the battery until the car wouldn't run anymore because the alternator was not charging the battery and the battery was running the ignition system. So before we get started, the first thing we want to do, because we are working with electrical components such as the alternator, is disconnect the battery. First thing, I'm going to take my handy dandy little adjustable wrench on there, and hopefully your battery terminals aren't super tight. Mine never are because I don't over tighten them like a knuckle dragging cave biscuit. And I'm just going to pop that negative terminal down along the side there. Alright, and that's it. Don't need to bother touching the positive. Just leave it on there. Always remember, if you remove the negative terminal, electricity flows from negative to positive, not the other way. You de-electrify the frame of the vehicle, and you can't accidentally shock yourself or arc and spark on electrical connectors and damage sensitive electrical components. So always the negative. Alright, so next thing we need to do is get this thing up in the air. I am going to have to remove the alternator, which is right here. Coolant hose, alternator. Alright, that's the timing chain cover. Here's the alternator right there. It doesn't come up through the front, the radiator, it's just too tight. And it's way easier and simpler to remove it through the bottom. I wouldn't necessarily say simpler or even necessarily easier, but it's actually doable. Alright, so that means we need to jack up the front end of the car. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, support it on jack stands, and then we'll be taking the tire off. Now, before you jack the vehicle, if you don't have a good electric impact gun or pneumatic impact gun, go ahead and loosen your lug nuts now. I'm going to wait because I have an electric impact gun. So again, you don't have an electric impact gun or a pneumatic gun, pop the hubcap off if you have one and loosen those lugs now. So you can actually, so the tire's on the ground and it won't just spin on you once it's in the air. Alright, so take my trusty jack here, and you can see under here the jack point for this car has a really nice big jack point on this vehicle. It's really convenient. I'm just going to center the jack on that and lift the whole front end up. Also, if you're going to lift the whole front end of a vehicle like this, set the parking brake, which I've already done. It prevents the vehicle from rolling backwards if the parking brake works. If it doesn't work, or if you're in doubt as to how good the parking brake works, chock the rear wheels with some blocks of wood or some blocks of stone. You can also lay a jack stand on its side at the back of the tire. That'll also do the same thing. Alright, that's probably good. Alright, so next I'm going to go ahead and take my trusty jack here and place it where the suspension arms meet the rear cross member. Right, that little space right there. There we go. Get a little higher. And there's that one. Alright. And now you just want to gently lower it down onto the jack stands and see where it lands on them. That's good. Alright, and then for me, I like to actually leave a little pressure on the front. Just like that. A little bit of pressure. Alright. Alright, so take a flat blade screwdriver and just work around the edge of this hubcap. Sometimes gotta get a little evil with these things. They do not always want to come off. Like this one. There it goes. It's starting. And comes right off. Alright, lugs are a 21mm socket. Using my trusty electric impact. And took them straight off. Alright. Alright, and the wheel is off. Roll that to the side over here. And nice big opening to work in, because we're going to need to take off this engine cover that is basically a splash guard for mud. Keeps mud off the front of the engine, keeps it out of the drive belt that's on the main crank pulley. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start taking these off. Alright, so there's a 10mm bolt here. And these mud guards aren't in the best shape. This car does have 150 something thousand miles on it, so there's some of the plastic little pop pins that are gone. It kind of falls off there. Yep, that just fell right out, so not a lot holding that one on. And a good habit to always have is take any bolts that you remove when you're removing splash guards and stuff and just thread them back in to the body where they go. That way you don't lose them. Alright, now we've got access to our pulley here and here. But we also need to remove the underneath splash guard as well. More 10mm bolts. Oh, that one doesn't feel so good. Head might break off. She's rusty. A lot of the stuff under here on these panels is really rusty. A lot of times it just breaks on you, especially if it was a car that was spent time up in the Northeast like this one did. There it goes. Got that guy too right there. Oh yeah, like the jack right there. Looks like it's coming. Oh, nope, head broke off. Look at that. Well, that sucks. That one is barely hanging on. Actually, get the ratchet on there. And it's just going to rip out. That's awesome. Okay. It's going well. I hate under panels for this reason. They just usually don't come out well on older vehicles that have been exposed to salt and not rinsed every winter. Just doesn't go well. Alright, comes out. Please don't break. It's probably gonna break. Maybe not. It actually didn't break. Wonderful. Alright, we have one plastic pop pin right there. I can see that from over here. Get a Phillips screwdriver. So this little plastic pop pin will hopefully come out nicely, and it is. It likes me. Center pulled out. Let's see if we can wiggle the backside through without wrecking it. And there we go. She's straight up. Alright. And look at that. Air conditioner nice exposed, so is the alternator. Alright. Take our hardware and bring it inside so we don't lose any of it. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and loosen up the air conditioner slash alternator belt, and the tensioner bolt, it's actually a big nut, is right there. But first, like most belt pulleys, you got to break loose the nut on the actual pulley because it actually locks the pulley and the tensioner in place. So I'm going to use a 14mm wrench for that, and it's just that nut down there. But I'm going to do that from underneath the car because it's a lot easier. And with our splash guards out, it's really easy. All I have to do is get on right there and break it loose. Which, that was already kind of loose. I don't think the last person tightened it up. That's all we had to do. Come up here. I've got a couple of short extension and medium extension 14mm socket. Slide it on the bolt. And release tension. Alright, I'm going to stop there and back down to the underneath of the car. So where you want to go is on the pulley itself because it's nice and smooth, and see if you can pull it off. This belt still has quite a bit of tension, so I'm going to have to loosen it quite a bit more. Alright, see what that does. Alright, so our belt's getting looser here. It still seems pretty tight. loosen it a little bit more.
Years later.
Alright, so we've loosened up the tensioner quite a bit, and what you want to do is once you actually get the bottom of the tensioner up a little bit, well, down, you want to try to pull up on it and wiggle it and remove tension from the belt. There we go. Now our tension's removed. What I would do, and what I recommend, is go to the bottom of the tensioner pulley and slide it off that first. It'll make, it's a nice smooth surface, it's not ribbed, it'll make things quite a bit easier. Get off there. And it really does not want to come off that crank pulley. Alright. And it's out. Alright, so now we're going to take off the 4 air conditioner mount bolts. 2 here, 2 up top. 14 millimeter. It was pretty easy, broke loose. Now you don't have to disconnect any lines or anything on this air conditioner. In fact, I'm going to let it hang on the lines. That's fine. Don't pull on it too much. Move it around. All we need it to do is drop down a little bit under its own weight. And I can't. The 4th one is right up in there. See it? Work on this one for a while. And I'm going to take all these bolts out, just let it kind of drop down. If it drops down real far, I'll put a jack stand under the pump so it doesn't stress the lines. Threading out nice. Bolt threads are still in good condition. This bolt's got some rust on it. She doesn't want to go all the way around without assistance. So let's put up the socket on it. There we go. And she slid out. Loose there. Nope, the top one's still tight. Does not want to turn by itself. Keep working on it. There it goes. That bolt slid back. And the last one. And that one's so slide it back and pump. Oh, we held up on. Just moving it down. Should hang down a little bit. So I'm gonna let it sit there. And look up top, see what we got. Alright, so this hose is just hanging up on the alternator a bit, so I'm gonna let it kind of do that, but I'm gonna go get a jack stand just in case. Alright, so I have a jack stand here. I'm going to put it under my pump and just raise it up and gently support the pump, just so I don't stress those lines out, those air conditioner lines, too much. Alright. So at this point, we can go ahead and start removing the alternator. Yep, all that work just to start moving the alternator. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off, and I've already pulled the booty back, the protective boot. I'm going to go ahead and remove that nut right there. That's it. So 12 millimeter. Glove off. And this is why you want to have the battery disconnected, by the way, because this line does have a connection to the battery, and as long as that negative terminal's off, you're safe. But if you put your bare fingers down there, you might get a surprise, a shocking surprise. Use my extensions here just to get a better distance on things. Nut does not want to come off. There it goes. Okay, so the nut is off. Set that up there. Chin extension. And then all we want to do is lift the positive wire off our alternator. Alright, so next there is the electrical connector to the rectifier and whatnot. Now, looking at this is directly connected to this connector right here, so you're going to want to take this off before you drop the alternator down, which looks nice and challenging. In fact, it looks like there's not much left of the plug because someone damaged it getting it off before, possibly. So that's really awesome. I might actually have to leave that connected. What I might have to do is take this connector off right here, and just so I can get the alternator down lower. We'll take a look at that when it gets there. Alright. Okay, well, so let's take a look at the alternator mounting bolts. Alright, so now I'm going to remove the alternator upper bracket bolt from the sheet metal bracket here. Alright, I'm just going to use my extension 12 millimeter socket. Get it on there. I have to go for a shorter extension here. Oh, jeez. Wow, that is on there. Okay, well, I'm going to get something bigger. Alright, so I went to go take this bolt out, but it was really giving me trouble, so I'm going to take a 12mm socket, half-inch socket, and a breaker bar, and show it what's for. There we go. I just broke it loose. There it goes. It does not want to come off. Get my smaller ratchet extension in there now. Flip it off. There we go. Spin that off now. And just get it out the rest of the way by hand. Alright, and the alternator bolt is out. Love me some grease. Alright. Now, just gotta get the other bolt. Alright, so this next bolt is a 14mm. It's at the back of the alternator. Just gotta move the air conditioner out of the way a little bit. Again, I'm going to use my breaker bar. Do the work for me. There we go. And look at that. Broke loose. Alright, switch to regular ratchet. Try a nice swivel ratchet. It's loose now, but I bet it won't come out. It keeps getting stuck. Come on. All right, there it goes. And that's the alternator bolt. Oh my gosh. Okay. Alright, to just help get the alternator out, I'm also going to take off the this wire harness bracket from the cylinder head, just kind of assist things along. So you're taking this nut off right here. getting this bracket out of the way is just going to help with the electrical connector on the alternator, and it's also going to help just be able to move the alternator around a little bit more. Alternator mount bracket. So we got the alternator connector right here, alternator and air conditioning connector. Alright, so just to help things out with the wiring, I'm going to disconnect the air compressor, air conditioning air compressor connector. Alright, which loosens me up quite a bit. And then I'm going to attempt to disconnect the air conditioning compressor slash alternator connector. Alright, and got it. Alright, so that is disconnected. And I'm actually going to pull the connector off its mount bracket. Alright, so I'm just using some needle nose pliers. Just gonna pop these little guys back through. There goes one. Pull these connectors up and out of the way. Alright, so now free to work our alternator out. Alright, so just grabbed it and moved it a little bit. So usually these are between two eyelets, so you kind of got to work the alternator back and forth to get under the vehicle and try to do that. Well, maybe I might have to do it from up here. Sometimes gotta get a pry bar, like my breaker bar, and just kind of pry against the case of the alternator. Work it up and down some more. Don't pry against plastic parts or the coolant housing. You gotta be pretty careful what you pry against. You don't want to break stuff on the motor. Oh, just moved a lot. Again, watch the AC. Oh, she broke free. Alright, so the alternator is popped out up its mount point. So now, gotta get under here and have fun working it out around the AC compressor without damaging anything. Alright, so I'm gonna move the AC compressor off the jack stand a second. Try to get the alternator around it. There we go. And then place the AC compressor back on it. There we go. And it's nice and safe. Alright. And there is the old nasty alternator. Looks pretty nasty too. Alright, so we've got the alternator here on the workbench, and now we're going to get the electrical connector out of it. And looks like someone damaged it. There's no press down anymore, so looks like this alternator may have been changed at one point, but they jacked up getting the connector on and off, so this is going to be fun. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver and carefully pry. Hopefully I can actually get the connector out now. This is what I like to call interesting when stuff like this happens. It's always very interesting. Fun. Oh, let me move a little bit. Oh, that's never a good sound. Okay, connector came off and half the plug came off with it. Alright, well, look at that. Wonderful. This looks like a job for super glue. Oh yeah. Actually, with the way that this is broken, you don't even really need that, because as long as this rubber seal right here isn't compromised, water can't get down in there because that rubber seal slides into here. And someone else had already broken the locking tab, so honestly, the rest of the connector really doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't lock in anyway. Alright. Unfortunate as that is, let's look at the alternator compared to the new alternator. Alright, new alternator. So whenever you're working on stuff like this and replacing components, take your new part and your old part and do a good comparison. Look at the mounting lugs. Alright, roll this over, look at these mounting lugs. Sometimes, and this one has a bushing, see the old bushing in this one, the Preston bushing? Sometimes you'll get an alternator where you actually have to swap these bushings out. Now, nowadays it doesn't seem like that's such a thing anymore. I think the parts rebuilders and aftermarket manufacturers are doing a way better job than they used to. There's not so much swapping up of bushings and pulleys and stuff like that anymore. Most of the stuff is plug and play. Alright, so that looks good. They're all the same. Alright, so pull this little thing off. I always like to look at the post for the positive wire. Take the new nut off. Yep, nice and tight. It's the same. Alright, put that back on there. Safekeeping. Pulley's the same. Yep. Alright, and you always want to look at the electrical connector as well. Two prong. Boom, there we go. This alternator is good to install. Alright, so I'm down in the wheel well of the car, and I'm going to take my new alternator and orientate it as it's going to go into the vehicle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to lay on my back here and slide it up over the top of the air conditioning compressor and kind of set it on it for now until I can get in another position to mount the back ears. Alright. So this will take some finagling. So I'm going to take the air conditioner off the jack stand so it can slide down a little more. I'm going to lift the alternator up over it. I'm going to set it on it, but I'm going to push up on the air conditioner so I don't put a lot of strain on the air conditioner lines. Alright, let's see here. I'm going to take the alternator and get it. Those are the mount. That's the mount spot right there. And look at that. It slid right on. I'm going to take my air conditioner, push it back up, try to get my jack stand on my air conditioner. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to hop up above the car. And it's pretty much there. I just got to get the bolt. Alright, so I've got my alternator attach bolt and its nut plate. I'll show you how that goes on in a second. Set these to the side. And I'm basically going to get the alternator up on there where it goes and then slide that bolt in, which of course is easier said than done, and I probably am going to have to do it from up under the car. Get the alternator up on there like so, okay, because I'm holding it up with one hand. Take my mount bolt, I'm going to move my compressor out of the way a little bit here. Get my mount bolt up in here. A little bit of trickiness, you gotta move it around with your hands. Wiggle my alternator. The goal is to start sliding that bolt in. Hopefully you can see that. And it is sliding in. I'll wiggle the alternator a little bit more. Try to get that through the other hole, and there it goes. Alright. Whew. Super difficult part's done. Now I can take my compressor, lift it up a little bit, and set it a little more secure on that jack stand. Alright, so back up top here, if you look down in, you can see, hopefully right there, that's the threads of the bolt. That's where this little plate goes. And what this little plate does is it grabs the ear of the alternator. You put it on this way onto the alternator and it grabs it and basically just stops the nut from turning. So, basically just a nut plate. Stops it from spinning on you. So to get this on, I'm actually going to have to reach down in there and I have to I'm going to have to reach down in and back the bolt out a little bit. Oh, it's pretty tight. It doesn't want to back out now. Come on. Okay, there it goes. So I'm spinning the bolt, backing it out some. I'm not going to back it out all the way though I can't see the bolt anymore. I just want it enough that I can get this little lock plate down in there. Slip this glove off so I can get my hand down in there. And actually I'm going to go down through the wheel well because this might be a little bit easier down through the wheel well. And it looks like it will be. I'm going to take my nut plate. I'm just going to slide it up. This should go on here without this much darn trouble. Oh. Maybe. Check that. And this just might take some fiddling with. I mean, some stuff is like that. Right. The bolt is, oh, you might have it. Oh, so I'm threading the bolt in, it decided to move over it. I just need to flatten it out a little bit so the threads engage. Oh, we might have it. Oh, I think we got it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get a Alright, so I got my 14mm ratchet. Turn that on to righty-tighty. We'll go ahead and get this bolt going down here. And you just want to run this bolt in, but as soon as it starts getting snug, stop. Maybe back it off a little because we want to make sure we get our other mounts installed and snugged up before we go crazy tighten this bolt up, or it'll just make installing the other mount bolt difficult. And it's starting to get snug, so I'm going to stop, pop up here, take a look, and it looks like it threaded on nicely down in there. See the bolt coming through the nut plate. Alright, so now we can go ahead and work on getting our other mount bracket installed. So if you remember, we took off our wiring harness / alternator mount bracket yesterday, so I'm going to work on reinstalling this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take the alternator / wiring harness mount bracket. I'm going to put it back on the cylinder head. There's just a little spot right there where it attaches. You want the locking tang going towards the cylinder head, and this bottom part that bends out towards you. There it is. Alright, so 12mm socket. Just gonna, and just running the bolt in. I'm not tightening it right now at all. Alright, so now we're going to attach, well, now that we have this bracket on, loose, I'm going to lift the alternator up, go from the back with the 12mm bolt, through the bracket and into the alternator, and just start the threads. And there we go, it started. Now, just as a side note, be careful pushing on these lines. These lines might get in the way on the air conditioning compressor and block you from being able to pull the alternator up to get that bolt started. Just all I do is I have that jack stand under the air conditioning compressor, and I just lift up the compressor and slide the jack stand up, lock it in place, and get a little bit more slack in these lines. So as I was putting the alternator mount bracket on, I realized that I have to put this on still. So that's probably something that you want to do. The bracket does need to go onto the alternator, this electrical harness bracket. So I'm going to take that top bolt back out, the one that goes into the cylinder head. I'm leaving the bottom one that goes into the alternator still in. And you know, as long as you didn't tighten everything up super tight, everything should come apart nice and easy. Now the alternator might drop down, so kind of cradle it. And just turn that bolt a little bit. There we go. The alternator's going to drop down a little bit. And I'm just going to take my mount bracket, put the bolt in it, wiring harness, tuck it down underneath the air conditioning line, and then run that bolt through my alternator mount bracket, lift the alternator back up, and put that all into the hole in the cylinder head. Alright, and I believe it started in the cylinder head, and that's what it should look like. If you look at it, there's your mount bracket for the alternator, and there's the electrical wiring harness mount bracket. The lock tang should engage against the alternator mount bracket. Alright, now we can go ahead and actually tighten everything back up. Alright, so I'm just going to make this snug. I'm still not going to torque it. Alright, I'm going to go around the back side and get my other 12mm bolt. It's awfully loose. Just running with my fingers. There we go. And that's snug. Check this one again. Snug. Alright. so at this point I have my bolts all in. They're fairly snug, and I'm going to go ahead and actually attach my wiring. Now, if you remember, I still don't have my electrical connector for my alternator, so I'm going to get that now. Alright, so I have my electrical connector for my alternator. This also has the joint connector for AC and the alternator, and the actual pigtail for the air conditioning pump as well, which this actually runs the magnetic clutch on the compressor. Alright, so I'm going to take my connector. I always recommend to clean these old connectors out with some electrical contact cleaner. You just get this at the parts store from CRC, and it helps remove some corrosion and clean out dirt and junk. Do all three connectors. Helps electrical connections be a little bit better, and that can never hurt on an older vehicle. So this stuff dries pretty quick. If you're in doubt whether it's dry or not, you can just blow some air in there, and it helps it dry really fast. Alright, so I'm going to take my connector and go ahead and plug it in to the alternator. And this one isn't going to click in, unfortunately, but it should bottom out nicely, which it feels like it is. Alright. Alright, it's in there now. Alright, I'm going to take my joint connector here. And see which way it goes. If it goes that way, yep. It's a one-way plug, it only goes one way. So don't force it. It's not going the other way. Spin it around, and it clicked together. Now remember, this has the two little pins on the bottom, so you have to plug that back into the bracket. And those just went into some holes on the bracket. Look over here, you can see the hole, one of the holes, and I'm just going to line that up nice and straight. Get that one started. Look down in there. Got the other one. Boom, it's back on the bracket. Alright, so now that we have our connectors on, our joint connector and our alternator connector, I'm going to go ahead and take off the new alternator's positive lead nut. And go ahead and run on the positive lead. Now when I do alternators, I like to pull the boot back and actually give a look at the terminal lug. The wiring doesn't look corroded in there at all. It actually looks nice. See, not corroded wires. It's crimped while it's tight. It's not loose. That's not causing any of our problems. I'm going to move this down, get it over the terminal lug. And it has if you look at the wire, it has these mount tangs that help it not turn when you tighten it up. Slip those down, and there's two little slots in where the alternator stud goes. Slides right down into those. Take our nut and thread our new nut on. Alright. Now you don't have to go crazy with tightening these. Just make them snug. They don't have to be really torqued on there to some crazy torque. Went ahead and got myself a couple extensions just to help myself out here. And like I said, just run that on and make it snug. Alright, so I went and checked for a torque on the alternator positive lead attachment. I actually did find a torque. It is 69 to 95 inch-pounds approximately. So I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it. I set mine to 80. I'm sorry, 85. I'm doing 85 inch-pounds. And double click. There we go. And lastly, when you're done, you want to go ahead and slide that protective boot. It just helps anything from stops anything from grounding out on the positive terminal. Alright, so now I'm going to tighten my two 12mm bolts. My upper 12mm bolt that goes to the cylinder head. It's 15.2 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that goes that low, so I did the math and set my inch-pound torque wrench to 180 inch-pounds. It does the same amount of torque. And that's torqued. We'll go back here. Go. Position a little bit. Try no extension. Maybe more extension. There we go. Nice and tight. Alright, so I've got my torque wrench set to 38 foot-pounds, and we're going to go ahead and torque up the alternator pinch bolt. That's the one big long bolt underneath. Alright, so slide the torque wrench up in there. Get it on there. It's a wonderfully tight area to be in with a torque wrench this big. First click. Come on. Get on there. There we go. There it is. And it's on there. Alright, so next we have to reinstall the AC compressor that has been rusting on our jack stand. So what you're going to want to do, make sure the little electrical connector up top is out of the way. Lift the compressor up, slide it back up into place, get your jack stand out of the way, and try to find where the mount bosses are. And if you look, there's these little feet that actually help you get it on there, which is actually really nice. You just wiggle it around, slide it in place, and it should sit on those little feet, those little tags, and try to hand start your mount bolts. I think I got that one hand started. The bottom one's in. There we go. You lift it up a little bit. one a little bit. And you really want to get all 4 bolts started at the same time. Nice and loose stuff. Take my extension off. It's really loose. Let's thread it in. Yep. Get it in by hand a little ways. The other one. Get the other one. Alright, let's start. See if I can use the ratchet. Should I go under this line? There we go. Oh, she's running right in. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and run this up to where it's just starting to snug. Not even snug though. Pre-snug. Because it's a thing when you're working on stuff, if you tighten one bolt up on something and the rest of them aren't tightened up, you'll find a lot of times it's a lot more difficult to get the other bolts started. Starting the threads on them. It's good to leave everything loose. I just felt a little bit of pull on that, so I'm going to go and under this radiator hose in the way with the bolts up in there. Feel it, and ratchet on there, and come on, ratchet. It does not want to go. What the heck? The bolt's just really loose. Put the ratchet back on there. There it goes. I'll run this one up till it's pre-snugged. Oh, there it is, pre-snug. And we'll get these going. The bottom one's going. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to snug this one up. There we go. Snug this one up. Put this one up in here. Snug. And snug. Alright. Alright, so now I'm going to torque my AC compressor bolts. The range on these is 33 to 44 foot-pounds. I have my torque wrench set to 40. Get it up on that first one that's behind the radiator hose. Double tap. Alright, now I'm going to grab this one, which is across from the other bolt. I always like to torque things in cross patterns, if I'm able. Evens out the stress on the component as you torque it. Torque that one. This one. Alright. Now we'll reach up here and get this top one. when you're torquing stuff, the final click or two you want to make sure you have your hand in the same place every time. That way you're not increasing or decreasing leverage on the torque wrench, and it actually, well, effectively changing the torque on the bolt. Alright. AC compressor is all torqued up. Alright, so to get this belt on the easy way, get it on the alternator pulley first. It might seem counterintuitive, but this wonderful coolant hose for the engine is in the way. The lower coolant hose, and it really, if you try to get it on last there, it's a pain in the butt. So I'm just going to run the belt down through from the top, and then I'm going to put it over the pulley. And there it is. It's over it. Alright. It's over the alternator pulley. I'm going to go down under the car, and I'm going to wrap it onto the AC compressor. Bring it up and around. Now you don't want to go underneath the idler pulley yet. You want that one to be the last one you slip it around because it's the easiest one. Now you want to go up and over the crank shaft pulley. Alright, and then you want to grab it. You can grab it over the top. Might have to reach up and over. Pop back up top. Make sure it's still on the alternator. And then push down on it. And try to push it down around the idler pulley. Alright. I can already tell this thing's gonna fight me, which is awesome. Love it when stuff just doesn't want to go together. It's the best. Best ever. Alright, get underneath the vehicle so I can see everything, because it's fighting me a little. Alright. Set it there. And I'm going to grab the belt and pull it down. I'll slide the idler up, push it as hard as you can, and then try to work the belt around the edge of it, like that. And it doesn't feel great on your fingers, I'll tell you that. Oh, it's close. It is right there. Come on, girl. You can do it. If you turn the idler pulley while you're doing this, it does help. I'm going to actually try to loosen it up top here a little bit more. Oh, it's going, and there it goes. Whew. Now we just gotta pop it over the ribs on the alternator. Make sure it's seated. Oh, there it goes. Whew, man. So much fun. Alright, so to tension up the belt, we're going to take a 14mm deep socket and our 2 extensions here. And in the righty-tighty direction, go ahead and tighten up our tensioner. Now, after getting a few turns on this, you want to go down and check the belt and see how much tension you've applied. Alright, let's check it. Still lots to play, so we got a ways to go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and check the belt tension again. Alright, so I'm going to take my inch ruler, put it up against the belt, and depress. Move it a little bit. Brace myself a little bit better. Got it on there. Alright, so I might actually be a little too tight. I'm shaking a bit. So let's try to push it, start shaking. Actually, I think I'm right on. I'm going to leave it there. Because right before I start shaking, it's a 1/16 before 1/4 inch. And I like to set them, usually shoot for a 1/4 inch tension on a used belt, and about a 1/16 of an inch under a 1/4 inch on a new belt, just to account for some stretch that's going to happen, so that, you know, after it stretches, it's still within that tolerance. Because when you set a belt, there's actually a tolerance. If you look at a belt check gauge, there's a window of too loose, too tight, and just right. If you set it towards the tighter end of the range, and you go to recheck it later after it's been driven a while or operated, the belt will usually be in the middle to more towards the bottom of the acceptable range. But when you do that, you don't have to go back and retighten anything. Alright, so now that's nice and set. Let's go ahead and tighten up the tensioner pulley nut. Alright, so to tighten up the idle pulley, I'm going to take a 14mm wrench and tighten it up. Now I can't get a torque wrench up in here, so again I'm just going to make this snug without going too crazy. Alright, that should be good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the right side under panel. I have sprayed my hardware with PB Blaster just to help it go in a little easier. I'm going to hand start these into their nut plates. Might have to do some pushing, some yanking, some pulling to get this all to line up, because as these under panels get older, well, even when they're new too, they just aren't the friendliest things to remove and reinstall. That's where a pop pin goes. I'm going to go ahead and install that now. Pop pin. Make sure it's pulled out all the way. It can be. There we go. Compress it. Find the hole up. Alright, and it's in. There we go. Alright. Now, let's get the rest of these bolts. Alright. And you always want to try to get them started by hand to make sure you're not cross-threading. Cross-threading is not your friend. Alright, so using a 10mm socket, ratchet, we're going to tighten these up. If you feel strong resistance to them tightening, stop, take the bolt back out, and try it again. You might be cross-threaded. And that's not going in at all. Awesome. In true panel fashion. And I don't like to tighten everything up super snug, because again, you might have to move some stuff around. Like that just slipped off. It's unfortunate. I have to play with this one a little bit. The nut plate's kind of jacked up. There's just not a whole lot underneath for this nut plate to truly attach to anymore. But I can hold it on there and tighten it the best I can. All you want to do is snug these. You want to go crazy. They're already in rough shape, and this is just plastic. Snug. and snug. Alright. Alright, so I'm going to reinstall the splash guard for the engine in the passenger side wheel well. You just want to slip it in here between those two plastic splash guards. Line it up. Take our bolt. Get it started. And 10mm socket. And run it in. And before I tighten that up, I've got an extra push pin here. Just gonna put it in this front spot because I feel like not too much time this panel is probably gonna meet a terrible fate. Alright, snug that up. Don't over tighten it. And that's it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put the tire on. You notice I'm not going full bore with this gun. I'm just barely pulling the trigger just to get these snug. You don't want to over tighten with your impact gun. Alright, so we're good to go ahead and drop the car down. So I'm going to jack it back up. And gently lower it back down. Alright, I'm going to torque the lugs to 85 foot-pounds in a star pattern. And then go around and do a circle check. Zero out my torque wrench. Reinstall the hubcap. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hook the battery back up. Alright. It's on there nice. Get a bigger wrench. Of course. Alright, snug up the negative terminal connection. Don't over tighten these, as it just crushes this lead in needlessly. If you can't turn it with your hands, not trying to turn it too hard, but if you can't really turn it without putting a lot of force on there, then it's nice and tight. Alright, and I like to treat it with battery terminal protector. Keeps corrosion down. Alright, so after installing the new alternator and getting that all put together, battery's hooked up, I'm going to go ahead and start the car and see if our battery light goes away. Alright, battery light, which was on constantly even when I got the car running, and battery light is out. Check engine light is out. Also, I had the brake light. See if that goes out. That goes out now. Awesome. Let the car settle out. Suspension after being up in the air. Alright, now to check the output of the brand new alternator. Alright, so to do this, leave the car running. Carefully reach down and lift the protected boot off the positive terminal of the alternator. Take a multimeter, select DC volts, long line with dashes underneath, DCV. And what you want to do is you want to take your black lead, here, black lead, and find somewhere to ground it to. I usually use shock tower nuts like that. And then take the positive lead and just go down. I'll put this up here so you can see it. And put it on the positive terminal of the alternator. And look at that, 14.37. Show you that again, take it off, put it back on. 14.37, 36. That is what a very healthy alternator should put out. Anything really below 13.5 volts is probably a sign the alternator is getting weak and probably going to go bad soon. You need to have more voltage than what the battery has putting out to actually charge it. Alright, so our alternator puts out good power. So I'm going to go ahead and move the boot back over, protect the boot. There we go, protect the boots back over. Alternator sounds good, belts look good. Alright, next I'm going to go ahead and just check my power output at the actual terminals themselves. So, red lead goes the red side positive, and I'm not going to put it on the battery, I'm going to put it actually on the wires coming in. Same thing with my ground, black lead goes to black ground. Look at that, 14.23, so that lower voltage is probably because the idle, I heard it actually drop as the engine's warming up, it's idling down. So that's why alternator's not spinning as fast, but it's still above 14 volts. That's wonderful. That means this battery is being charged. And the battery itself, it's got 14.22 going in it. Alright. That's awesome. Now the best thing to do is go ahead and let the vehicle heat up all the way so it idles at its hot idle. This car, I believe, is 725 to 750. So I'm going to let it do that, and then I'm going to go recheck at my battery cables and see what's actually going in the battery idle. Alright, so I've let the engine come up to operating temperature. It's idling at its hot idle, so I'm going to check the voltage. And we are getting 13.9998 volts. That is plenty of healthy voltage from our brand new alternator to our batteries. So we are good to go. And that is a alternator replacement on a 1999 Nissan Maxima. So yeah, that's it. This job it's not as easy as some jobs, but honestly it's not that hard either. I would rate this probably a 4 out of 10 for difficulty. And if you go to a auto repair shop and have this done, it's going to run you anywhere from about $500, $600, $700. That alternator I got, it's got a 3-year warranty on it. By the time I bring the core back, the old alternator, and get money back, probably cost me about $110, $120. So an alternator that an auto shop would buy, they're going to mark up 300%. 3 times what they pay for it. Then they're going to charge you about $100 an hour in labor. So you can see a $100-something alternator, well, it's going to be about $320, $330. And then $100 an hour, about a 3-hour job, 3.5 hour job, you're looking at $300 or $400 in labor. There you're at that, you know, depending on the shop, $600, $700. So again, not that hard. I give it a 4 out of 10. Totally doable with basic hand tools. I didn't use any special tools, basic hand tools, and a little bit of patience, and save yourself $500. And that's what it's all about when you're rolling greasy, saving that money a little at a time. Alright, hope this video was helpful, and see you later, everybody.
They see me rolling greasy.